Yep. So I'll just extend the intro a little bit, tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Mickey Wilson. I was born at Vail Valley Medical Center on August 12th, 1988. And so I am about as local as it gets, although I didn't grow up here. I grew up in Durango. And I grew up in Durango, and then I went to college at Colorado School of Mines, where I got a bachelor's in physics, a minor in public affairs, and then a master's degree in microelectronic materials, aka solar cell materials. And while I was at Colorado School of Mines, I fell in love with a lot of things: kayaking. Do I have my hacky sack? No, I took it out of my pocket. I usually carry it. I was going to show you. And then slacklining, because I thought slacklining was really, really awesome because I love skiing. I had the Epic Pass for my entire college career. I skied Vail, Breck, Arapahoe Basin, but it was really hard for me to manage my academics with the I-70 corridor driving. And it wasn't as bad 10 years ago because I was there from 2007 to 2012. But I found slacklining as a really great alternative outlet for my athletic, needs and desires. We all are, multifaceted people. We all love to, stimulate our brains and our bodies. And slacklining, I found I could literally, in my backpack, my regular size school backpack, I could fit my books, my computer, and a little tiny 50-foot slackline. And in between classes, I could go out onto the quad, campus quad, and set up a slackline in between two classes for like an hour and get a really good, bit of exercise, outdoor recreation, have a lot of fun with friends. And that's basically how I fell in love with slacklining. So when I finished my master's degree at School of Mines, I hit a fork in the road. And I was 23 years old, and I could either try and go get a job and go work on solar cells or engineering or something like that, or I could pursue this other path that was sort of unfolding before me, which was professional slacklining. I got an offer to get sponsored by Gibbons Slacklines, the biggest slackline company in the world. They're based out of Stuttgart, Germany, and they asked me if I wanted to join the team and do some slackline tours and compete in some, go to some competitions and maybe do some shows. And I ended up going that route, the latter. And so basically I just tabled my master's degree that I worked 5 years to get, and I decided to go, chase the dream, walk the line, and see where it took me. And over the next 7 years, I competed and performed in all over Europe, the Middle East, South America. I won 4 world championships, 3 of them were Red Bull championships. One was an independent world championship. I met a lot of amazing people. I learned a lot of things. I met my wife through slacklining. We ended up getting married on a slackline, sort of. Oh, you know what? I did not actually include that particular video, but you can Google it if you want, slackline Space Net wedding. But I've just woven the slackline into my entire being, so to speak, over the last 7 years. One of the, I had a lot of, I guess you could say, worries throughout those 7 years. Not just about getting hurt or having, the insecurities of being a professional athlete in a super niche, avant-garde, up-and-coming, burgeoning sport that nobody knew about. Most of the time I tell people on an airplane, I'm like flying to Dubai or something, I'm like, oh, I'm a professional slackliner. They're like, I can't even think about all the ridiculous responses I got. Nobody knew what it was. So, that was hard. But one thing that I think was one of the biggest affirmations of all of this crazy slacklifing that I did was on January 4th, 2017, I was skiing at Arapahoe Basin, and I got to use my slackline skills to help save a life, basically. I was actually staying that night at my godfather Bob's house, so I just cruised back in that night and went, hey Bob, guess what I did? Or guess what happened today at work? I was working as a ski school instructor because I didn't need the money, but I needed the free ski pass. I'll talk more about that later. I can go into that story as much or as little as you guys like. It can be a long, short story. And now currently, I've kind of set aside the slack life a little bit, and I got a job 3 months ago as a photovoltaic technician at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory in Golden, Colorado. So my life got really out of balance in a way, chasing balance on the line, and all I did was slackline and kayak and skydive and base jump and ski, and I totally forgot about everything. And then I turned 30, I kind of hurt my knee, and I decided to try and go chase the other, find balance in my life, and somehow I lucked out. I got a job working at this really cool laboratory in Golden, Colorado. NREL is its acronym, and they're doing some of the best work in renewable energy in the world. A lot of really great scientists there, so I'm really lucky to be there. And that's kind of just my introduction of myself and what where I'm coming from, and what I'm doing here today is I want to talk to you guys about slacklining and the science of slacklining, and a sort of a general overview of slacklining. And I hope after this, you guys will walk away either maybe more excited to try slacklining yourselves, maybe more knowledgeable about how to maybe buy a slackline for a loved one or a friend if you think that might be a good gift, or just in general, maybe a little more knowledge about some kind of weird sport that seems to be getting more and more attention.
Front page today.
Front page of the Veiled Daily. Yeah, I was trying to think of a eloquent transition to that, but yeah, thank you, Paul. So yeah, let's. That's a picture. Do you need a chance we could turn these lights off? I just thought of that. This is a picture from Catania, Sicily, when I won my second world championship at the Red Bull Airlines competition. This was 2016 in Catania, Sicily, and basically this is an air. They call this an airline. It's a trick line, which we'll talk about more, but it's a high tension slack line made for acrobatics, and they rig it 30 or no, this one was about 40. Yeah, geez, look at those people down there. Maybe it was 60 feet high above a huge airbag, and you're slacklining without a leash. This line that you guys all saw in the Veiled Daily today and that everybody knows about, everybody's talking about, that's a high line where they're rigging it off of solid anchors, lots of steel hardware, bolts, and very extremely safe rigging going on, and then they're harnessing into it with a climbing harness and a safety leash. That's how most highlining is done. Highlining is one of the most extreme, but one of the most safe extreme sport, one of the safest extreme sports in the world. That's what I try to tell people and teach people about. And throughout this presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit about the physics of slacklining and why, for example, highlining is actually one of the safest sports you can do. So, but this is an airline, and it's also safe because it's over an airbag, but it's a totally different beast. And this is what I specialized in most in my career because I had an acrobatic affinity. I liked doing flips. I grew up with a trampoline, and I also liked being up high and climbing on things. So that's kind of where I found my wheelhouse in the sport of slacklining, doing things like this. This is me in the middle of a butt bounce, backflip 360 to chest bounce on this 2-inch wide piece of polyester webbing. Does anybody know what webbing is? Kinda? No? Okay, so everybody knows what rope is, right? Sorry. But rope is like this. Okay, we've all seen rope. Webbing, which slack lines are made out of, is flat rope. It's flat, like the world in the 1400s. Okay? And it's made of the same stuff. Rope is either made out of nylon or polyester or some high-tech material like Dyneema or Technora. And webbing is the same, but it's woven in such a way that it's flat, and it has a top and a bottom, and you can flip it. Okay? So that's essentially what a slackline is made out of. A slackline is a flat rope. And what I'm going to jump into right now is the different types of slacklining. So, like, what is slacklining? What is the sport of slacklining? This is probably what a lot of people think of when they think of slacklining. You maybe have been walking somewhere, walking through a park, and you saw some crazy circus performer doing something on a slackline rigged between, or you didn't know what it was. Maybe you thought it was a tightrope, right? But a slackline is essentially a flat piece of webbing, flat rope, anchored between 2 points. And in general, most people's slack life journey starts in a park. That's where 95% of the people out there who are slacklining, those guys up there in Minturn doing that high line, they probably at one point either had a friend or just like me, 10 years ago, I randomly was walking through the park at my campus and I saw a guy on a slackline like that do a backflip and land back on the line, and then I was hooked. But it doesn't always have to be like that. You don't have to be doing backflips and crazy things. You can also just have nice, casual, easy walking and balance. And doesn't have to be anything dangerous. So slacklining is the act of balancing on webbing that is anchored between 2 points. That's essentially a slackline. You can, yes?
Does the slackline width alter? Because you said 2 inches, and that doesn't look like 2 inches to me. Your silver.
Yeah, that was a trick line that I was on. You're getting a little ahead of me, but that, yes, they do differ. The widths differ. The lengths obviously differ because you can go from 0 to infinity, and the materials differ, and I'll get into that. So I will answer your question as we move on through the presentation. So this is the most typical type of slacklining in the world. I'd say, I'm making this statistic up, but I'd say 95% of the slacklines that have been rigged in the history of the world are like this. Maybe 90%, maybe 92%.
Maybe 99%.
I don't think so. Highlining and tricklining are pretty popular.
Okay.
And those are the other two disciplines we'll talk about in a second. A couple things that I will just point out right away, because this is a great picture, is you notice that the anchor is a tree, right? The surface area is grass, always a great place to learn to slackline, a park with nice grass. They have put a really awesome piece of cardboard around the tree. Now that might seem dumb, but it's actually protecting their equipment, protecting it from abrasion, because these things are tough, but as we all know from intuitively, the tighter things get, the easier it is for them to break, right? The more force that something is being subjected to, the easier it can break or get rubbed, right? If I'm just pushing on this box, right, it's pretty easy for me to slide my hand along it, right? But if I push really hard, it's harder to slide, and that's friction. Friction in physics is normal force times the coefficient of friction. So the more normal force there is between two objects, the more friction there is. So when we get our slack lines tight, we use tree wear. We call it tree wear or tree protection. Honestly, cardboard is a great piece of tree wear. It's cheap. It's in the spirit of recycling because it's better there than in a landfill. And it's protecting the tree from abrasion. Friction is abrasion. When things are subjected to friction, they undergo abrasion. Just like when your tires squeal when you hit the brakes too hard. That's friction and abrasion. And that's why you leave skid marks. So I just want to point that out in this picture. She has really great slacklining form too. The guys at Walking Mountains wanted me to go over a little bit about not only the physics of the slackline, the steel, the forces, the tension, but also our body kinematics. You know, what allows us to balance. And, you know, I mean, it's sometimes slacklines are on. You can have slacklines that are 1/4 inch wide. They make webbing that is and you can balance on a piece of wire. The circus performers do tightrope and cable walking. What allows us to stand on these narrow lines and balance? Well, it's a couple things, really. What I tell people when I'm teaching them the slackline is I tell them, you want to have a super strong, tight lower body from about your waist down. You are controlling the line with your legs. Your legs are tight and strong, and they're not wobbly, and they're definitely not straight like a gymnast or a ballerina. They are bent, and you're in an athletic position like you were skiing, and you are controlling the line, not letting it wobble from here down. Kind of like her, right? She's got, see that nice athletic bend in her knees? Her feet position, that can kind of be whatever. You can have your feet straight like this. You can have one, like a lot of slackliners prefer this stance. I don't know exactly what it's called. The back foot is opened up. This kind of becomes their control leg. The back leg kind of becomes their power leg, and the left or the front one is kind of just the steering and the direction, and then they will actually walk like that, keeping the same orientation every time, with the back leg open, the front leg straight. Some people walk duck-footed, and that gives you more of a chance to put your foot on the line, because if you're going straight with the feet on the line, you're trying to put your 4-inch wide foot on a 1-inch wide slack line and you might miss. But if you all of a sudden have your feet open like that, your width becomes greater relative to the slack line width. And then from here up, from waist up, it's medium loose, medium tight, depending on how the slack line is. You might have to be a little bit looser if it's a tight line, or a little bit tighter in your upper body if it's a loose line. But either way, you're not gripped. You're definitely not gripped. You're kind of loose, and your lower body is tight. That's controlling the slack line, and your upper body is doing the balance. Because how do we balance something? Do we have any? I forgot. I wish I had a pole or something. But like when you balance like a long pole on your hand, sometimes what are you doing when you're moving your hand? You're keeping the center of mass of whatever object that is balancing, because objects have a center of mass, right? When you're a human, your center of mass is about right here, right? But if I were to all of a sudden put all my hands over here, my center of mass has shifted this way. So when you're standing on a slack line, you are trying to keep the center of mass of your body over the slack line at all times. If your center of mass starts to shift this way, you can move your arms this way or your legs this way, and that brings your center of mass the other direction. So slacklining is just a balance, an interplay of the line and your body's center of mass. So that was for you guys. I remember you guys wanted me to talk about, that's, I think, the best way I can describe how a slackliner or a tightrope walker or anything balances on a slackline. They're keeping their center of mass right over that slack line. And if that center of mass drifts off to the right, she takes that left hand, or right hand, excuse me, or maybe that leg over to the other side of the line to bring the center of mass back above the line. And it's a constant dance. It's always moving back and forth. That's slacklining. That's what it is. That's the essential slackline. 2 feet above the ground, 1 foot above the ground. The other tree is probably 30 feet away, maybe 40 feet away. Depends. And as you change the distances of the trees or your anchors, you maybe have to raise the slack line up higher so it doesn't touch the ground, or you can alternatively get the slack line tighter so it doesn't touch the ground. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Highlining. Ooh, yeah. No, it's awesome. You'll notice a couple things right here. The most important thing, climbing harness, safety tether, steel ring. And this, even though it looks like one single line, like this guy's putting his entire life in the hands of one single piece of webbing, it's actually 2 pieces of webbing. Everything in here is actually doubled. This is actually 2 rings. This is actually, and I can demonstrate this. I can pass this around if you want. This is actually don't mind that. That was my wife. She didn't know how to tie a knot right. I'm just kidding. But don't worry about that. But you can see in here that, see how this is a piece of webbing with a rope inside of it? Mm-hmm. So this is 2 pieces of material. You can pass it around and people can feel that. So that's what our highline leashes are made out of. You're not trusting your life to one single slackline webbing and one single ring and one single leash. It's 2 slackline webbings, it's 2 leash rings, and it's 2 leashes. And over there on that anchor, and over there on that anchor, and up on the anchor on the slackline in Minturn, there's 5 bolts on each side. 5 bolts at different parts of the rock. And they're taking one of these guys called a round sling or a polyester span set that has a breaking strength of, let's see if this tag hasn't worn off, in a basket configuration, 2,000 kilograms, like 4,000 pounds. In a girth hitch, 800 kilograms, 1,600 pounds, okay? So this thing, if I were the tree, right, and if I were to rig off of it, it would take 4,000 pounds of force for this to break. That would be your V8 Hemi truck driving in first gear, pedal to the metal, or more probably. So, yes, I'll pass all these around. Sorry, yep. You can have a look at polyester round sling, also known as a span set, used heavily in the rigging industry. When you go see a concert, all the lights you see hanging from the top, that's actually what they're hanging those with. And slackliners have taken that technology and adapted it to their sport. So again, just remember, if you wrap that around a tree, you're going to have to pull on it with 4,000 pounds of force to go past its limit. And in the rigging industry, that's actually, we have this thing called working load limit and breaking strength. Working load limit is what the industry standards have set that says it's safe to use this material at this force, at this tension. But you can actually go above it even. But that's what the people who made that recommend is the safe working load limit for that sling. So you can go more than 4,000 pounds, but you're not supposed to. So it actually might break at 6,000 pounds. Yeah.
What we can feel in that there's something inside.
Multiple layers.
What are the guts?
Threads, thousands of threads of polyester. Thousands of strands of polyester woven in a way and woven together to make an infinity loop. So, is he risking his life right now? No. Well, do you risk your life when you take the on-ramp at I-70 next to NREL? Right when I interviewed for the job, there was that horrible crash there that took some lives and a semi ran into a bunch of people, and driving's dangerous. You take a chance. You take a calculated chance every time you step behind the wheel. I'll tell you this right now. As a physicist, as a slackliner, he could jump off that slackline 1,000 times. Right there, he could jump off, get back up, and jump off again 1,000 times, and nothing would happen except for his leash and his leash rings and his harness would catch him. So, the bolts are in the rock. The span set is connected to the bolts with these steel locking carabiners that have it says on the side of them, working load limit 45 kilonewtons. A kilonewton is 225 pounds. So think 4 tons each one. You can pass these around too, and you can those are strong. So lots of bolts in the rock, lots of carabiners connected to the bolts, connected to one of those really strong industrial rigging slings. All redundant. We don't usually just use, even though that's more than strong enough, we usually use 2 of those. We usually use 5 bolts. We usually use 5 steel carabiners. We always use 2 slack lines that our rings go through. Do I have my leash? Leash rings. These are actually aluminum leash rings. Sometimes we use aluminum. Doubled up aluminum is also plenty strong, and it's doubled up, so it's redundant. One is backing up the other. Another example of what I'm talking about with our doubled up leash, this isn't just one leash, it's not one piece of rope, it's a piece of rope with a piece of webbing, tubular webbing. So we can pass that around. That is what goes onto the slack line right there. Those are the leash rings connected to the leash, which you tie into your harness, just like when you're climbing. Yeah, Bob?
So Mickey, if you have 2 slack lines there, how do you keep them on top of each other? Or
Tape.
Are they independent?
They are independent. They are totally independent, and that's the whole point of highline rigging, is that everything is independent. And every part of your highline system has a backup. If one breaks, the other catches, right?
1 foot, can you have both feet on different slack lines then?
No, we tape them together.
Okay, that was
You just segued me into, Bob. You just answered. You get to check out the next piece. This slack line is set up for highlining because it's 2 pieces of webbing. See how we taped them together? Yep. The tape doesn't take away any of the strength, but it makes it so that the 2 lines act as one. Okay. So you can walk a line and it feels like you're walking one slack line in the park, but really you've got 2 pieces of safety keeping you safe. This is a little heavy. This is maybe the heavy. That is slackliner preference, and if you're rigging a 50-foot long slackline, you want your tapes a couple feet apart. If you're rigging a 400 meter line, like the one they have up in Minturn right now, their tapes are 30 feet apart from each other. Bigger distances, making bigger distance loops in the backup.
So the backup's the scallop like we see underneath it?
Yeah, scallop?
Well, I call it scallops like this.
Loop. We call them backup loops. You rig the backup line at a lower tension than you rig the main line, because that way, if something were to break, the main line is at a higher tension. The main line is more likely to break. Neither are likely to break. We're both talking in percentages in the hundredths of a percent, almost zero. These things don't break. There are hardly any recorded instances of these slacklines breaking, because it's all coming from rigging. You don't hear about stages falling too often because the riggers in the world of rigging have figured out what they need to do to make these things safe. And that's what the highliners are doing. We're not risk takers, we're risk managers. So there's no risk. There's extremely we have minimized the crap out of that risk.
We'll perceive what we see.
But that's why I say highlining is the safest extreme sport in the world. People see it and they think it's so crazy. They think that yeah, Tim.
Between scary versus dangerous. It's incredibly scary, but it's incredibly not dangerous.
Yeah, I've been highlining for almost a decade now. I've been on all kinds of highlines all across the world, and there is an intrinsic fear in me every time I get on a highline. Still, I can't, even though I know I'm safe. I've checked my knot. I've had my friends check my knot. I've checked both anchors. I know everything about my system is bomb-proof. But you get out on that line and you look around and you're 500 feet high. Your body intrinsically kind of doesn't want to be out there, but for a lot of us, you do want to be out there, because that's where you really, get to learn things about yourself and take care of that slackline. That's going to save my life this weekend when I set it up. Any more questions about highlining and why this guy is not risking his life, but instead he's just an adventure seeker having a really nice walk on a slackline? Everybody feels pretty good about why the highline is safe? Okay, cool. So that's highlining. That is one of the two main extensions of slacklining, like what we saw on the last slide. Honestly, I could teach a person to slackline like this for 1 week. If I were to teach them 7 days in a row and give me a week with them, I could take them out to here and do this like the following week. There's not a big difference. A lot of it's in your head, and especially if they're willing to trust the person that's taking them, it's not a huge jump to go from this to this. It actually is a bit more of a jump to go from this to this. That is Andy Lewis. He's the godfather of slacklining. He's one of the main guys who invented the sport of tricklining, the second type of slacklining. In general, you can see one thing. I don't know if it's not super easy to tell, but this is not 1 inch wide. This is 2 inches wide. And it's also not easy to tell, but it is extremely tight. It is probably about 5 to 10 times tighter than this line. If you were to have a force meter, what we call a dynamometer, that measures force, not pressure, but force. Force can be measured in pounds. You can measure in kilograms. You can measure in kilonewtons. This line probably has 500 pounds of force on it, meaning that if you were to swap out all the stuff, all the hardware, all the anchors, you'd probably need 5 really big, strong guys holding that line to create that tension so that it doesn't just fall down. This line, 2,000 pounds. 2,000 pounds, 20 guys, 20 big, strong guys or girls, big, strong people, pulling it like all together in an incredible tug of war. 2,000 pounds of force. Yeah.
I can't, maybe it's the picture, I don't see his safety harness.
No, sorry, I'm laughing because sorry, I'm not making fun. That no, you can. You're right. No, it's not. It's not a bad question because it's blurry. The background's super blurry. It's hard to tell how high he is. That line is probably this high off the ground. Trick lining is what I got into a lot, especially because, like I said, I grew up with a trampoline. I loved doing flips off trampolines, on my skis, off cliffs. And the trick line, it's essentially a slack line, but a couple things are different. It's generally 2 inches wide, and it's generally rigged much, much tighter. Now, think of a rubber band. We're going to get into this a little bit more. I'm getting ahead of myself, but if you pull the rubber band really, really tight, and then you flick it, what does it do? Boom, right? It has rebound force, rebound potential, rebound energy. If you take the rubber band and bring it in close together and flick it, nothing happens, right? There's no energy in it, okay? So a trick line is a slack line that has been pulled very tight. And it can be made of the same materials as other slack lines, but it's a lot tighter. That's the essential thing with trick lining. It's a tight trick line. It's a tight slack line. And when you're on it, when you're standing on it, it feels a lot like a regular slack line actually. But when you jump up and land back on it, it bounces you like a trampoline. I sometimes tell people that a trick line is a 2-inch wide, 80-foot long trampoline. Or a balance beam, or it's a balance beam made of trampoline-like material, right? But it's still webbing. It's exactly like this, just 2 inches wide rather than 1 inch. And you can turn this into a trick line if you pull it tight enough. It'll bounce you up into the air. A trick line is essentially a slack line that is rigged tight and can give you air time. That's the essential difference. And there's but you can rig it up high off the ground and attach yourself to it with a leash, or you can rig it high up off the ground and put an airbag underneath you, like what I showed you on the first slide. The type of competitions that I've done with Red Bull and whatnot. This is Andy. He kind of invented this sport like 10 years ago. He's a really wild, wacky guy from Northern California. He's doing like a front flip here, or maybe a back flip, it looks like. It's hard to tell. A couple other things to talk about is trick liners generally wear shoes. Not all of them. Some of them would go barefoot, but a lot of them wear shoes, just like skate shoes. Flat sole. Flat sole is very important because your slackline is flat, and you don't really want like a runner's, like even this is actually a pretty decent slackline shoe because it's flat. What you kind of don't want is like maybe a jogging shoe that has that big heel, a raised heel, something like that. You really want a flat-soled shoe if you're going to slackline your shoes. So that's something to think about. And a lot of the same elements are there. It's blurry. Maybe I should have picked a better picture, but I can tell you right now. Oh, I just figured out where this picture is. Sorry, I made my presentation from Google. I love Google. Oh, I want a picture of trick lining. Google image trick line. So this is in Germany, and these are these huge pillars that hold up this ceiling at this event center. And he's got that right there, hard to see. That's a span set. That's one of these. And that right there, that's the padding, keeping the span set from rubbing. And that right there, that's probably a ratchet. A lot of times with trick lines, you get them tight with ratchets, come-alongs, like what truckers use, because you can get a lot of torque out of that little like ratchet wheel. Because you've got a ratchet wheel that's like this big, but you've got a lever arm on the ratchet that's this big. That is going to give you a lot of torque. So, trick lining. Trick lining and high lining, the two disciplines of slacklining. Does that kind of make sense for you guys painting the picture of the big picture of slacklining and the different kinds of sports? It's like skiing. Skiing, you've got freestyle, you've got racing, you've got backcountry, and then within racing, you've got slalom, super G, downhill, and whatever the fourth one is. You know what I'm saying? Slalom, thank you. So it's a multidisciplinary sport, and these are just the two main ones. You also have other weird ones like rodeo lining or other things. It's hard to describe all of them, and I don't need to go into it. But this gives you a really good idea of the two main disciplines of the general sport of slacklining, like she's doing. It all splits out into usually either that or that. And one more thing is 2-inch, 1-inch. That's another way to break it up. Yep.
How's the sport been going? And then you said that you were sponsored by a German company.
Yeah.
So that it's big over there also? Obviously.
It's worldwide. What's your question though, exactly?
How long has the sport been going on?
So if slacklining is defined as the activity of balancing on webbing.
If I'm reading Wikipedia, I guess, what would they say? Because it's different than tight roping, obviously. Slack.
Exactly. Tie roping's been around for hundreds of years.
Right.
150 years. 19th century circus performers, maybe, right? If slacklining is defined as the act of balancing on a piece of webbing like this, it's about 1970s in Yosemite Valley, the climbers of Yosemite, like those guys that you might have seen in some of those Netflix movies like Stone Masters or whatever it's called. Anyways, the 1970s climbers of Yosemite, when they were hanging out in Camp 4 on their down days from climbing, and they were taking breaks from climbing, they had this material, because webbing is what a lot of climbers use to make their anchors. They use the rope to catch them when they fall, and they build their anchors with this webbing. So they had the webbing, they had the carabiners, so they started figuring out ways to tension them in between trees and walk slack lines when they weren't climbing. That's more or less the origin of slacklining. Yep, that's where it all started. Yosemite Valley, late 70s, early 80s. Okay. Whoa, physics! This is a science thing. Is this on wheels? No. Am I going to block your guys' view? Let's go right here. Okay, so what is a slack line? Let's say that we've got 2 trees, right? Because trees are our favorite thing to slackline off of, right? We're all tree huggers in the slackline world. We love our trees. And we've wrapped the tree with 2 slings, and obviously we've put some nice tree wear around our trees, right? So that we're taking care of the tree and our gear. And then let's not worry about the hardware and everything. Let's just ignore it. Let's just pretend that we're going to put a slack line between these 2 points. Well, when we first set it up and put a little bit of tension on it, right, it's going to be straight across, right? Because nothing's on it. But then, let's say that we want to step on the slack line. What's it going to do? It's going to bend down, right? Oh my gosh, I totally missed that. I wanted to go halfway. We want to stand up in the middle. Of course, you don't have to stand up in the middle. You can stand up anywhere, but I just like symmetry. I probably still missed it. Okay, so we've got our slackliner. So this is where the line was, right? It was this high. And then when we stepped on it, it stretched, right? So right away, what do you think happened to the tension on these anchors, holding it up? Did the tension go up, or did it go down when the person stepped on it? Yeah, it got tighter, right? Because you could think of it a lot of reasons. You could think of it like they're holding the slackliner up now, so that's why there's more force. But the way I like to think of it is, think of it as the rubber band analogy. Here, this slackline is X distance, right? But when the slackline is down here, it's longer than this, right? It has been stretched, right? It's like Pythagorean's theorem, right? This is a longer distance than this. You all agree, right? But the material's the same, right? We haven't added or taken away any slackline from the slackline. It's still the same amount of material. So it's like a rubber band. When you take a rubber band and you don't pinch it really hard and you don't let your finger slip and you pull it, you've taken the same amount of material, but you've stretched it, and that's going to create a lot more force. So that's one way to think intuitively of how the slackline creates force on your anchors. So one of the most important things to know in slacklining is, how much force am I putting on my line? We know that because we're kind of like riggers, right? Just like the riggers in the concerts don't want the stage to fall onto the Bon Jovi or whatever. They calculate the forces so that they know how much weight there is, right? Same thing with slacklining. We don't want to put too much force on our anchors, on our trees, or on our bolts on the high line. So how can we figure this out? Well, if you look up there, right, I don't need to draw this out too much because you see I've drawn the same thing that we have here, right? You've got W, which is the weight of the person, right? Everybody knows how much they weigh, you know? They weigh, however much they weigh, 100x pounds. We know the distance, right? We know the distance between these 2 trees because you can go out to any pair of trees and go 1, 2. You can measure the distance, 50 feet or something, right? What else do we know? Oh yeah, if we know how tall we are, or we say that this person is such and such tall, and we know that the slack line has sagged down this much, right? We know this distance, right? The distance from where the slack line was to where the slack line is now. Does that make sense? We call that the sag. In this diagram, we're calling it H, okay? We know the horizontal distance, we know our weight, we know the height, we know the horizontal distance divided by 2, because we're going to turn this into a triangle and use, you can do it two ways to calculate your forces. You can use trigonometry, you can use sines, cosines, and thetas and everything, or you can actually just use a relationship. Because what do we want to know? We want to know the force on the slack line, right? We want to know T. We want to know how much this slack line is pulling on this anchor so that we don't break it, so that we don't put 4,000 pounds of force on it, which we're not going to do. Slackliners don't really do this like every time they set up a slack line, but when you're setting up crazy slack lines, 400-meter long slack lines, it's good to know and have this in the back of your pocket. So if you draw this triangle, right, this triangle right here, this marker's dying. Let's go green. A little better. We know that this distance is L over 2, right? And we know that this is H, okay? Right? We also know that, that this is our tension force, right? And we know, because we can do calculus, or we can do trigonometry, we know that this is the distance, and we know that this is H, and that this is also in forces. This is the weight of the slackliner divided by 2, right? Because it's two forces, right? It's two vectors holding this slackliner up. So on this side of the triangle, this is force. This is distance. This is distance. This is distance. This is force. So we're making a relationship, right? Okay, we're trying to compare two triangles. We're trying to compare a triangle of force, okay? So the forces in this triangle are weight over 2 and tension. But we know all three distances, right? Because it's a triangle. We know this is half the distance between the trees. We know this is the height, maybe the height of the slackliner, whatever, the height of the sag. And then because we know these two, we can calculate this easily, right? Pythagorean theorem. We don't need to go into that too much. So you make a relationship. You say that D divided by H is going to be proportional to T divided by W over 2. That's equation 1, right? And you can rearrange that to solve for T. But, oh wait, no, sorry, I got ahead of myself. You need one more equation, right? Pythagorean's theorem. D, right, D squared is equal to L over 2 squared plus H squared, right? And then you can solve that for D. And that's what we do here, right? Here we're using just the distances, just the known vector quantities, right? That's why I'm trying to explain. We got two triangles. We got a force triangle and a space triangle. So you take your space triangle and you come up with this relation, D, right? So now we've got two equations and only one unknown. We solve for the unknown. We've got tension, and it's in terms of all things we know, right? We know the weight of the slackliner, we know the distance, and we know 2 over H. Or no, we don't know the distance, but we can solve for it using the triangle, the space triangle. And so now we've got tension in terms of all quantities that we know. The weight of the slackliner, the height or the sag, the amount of vertical sag that the slackline goes down when the slackliner stands on it, right? And L's just the distance between the two trees, right? And again, H again. So we know all of these quantities. So thus, what I'm trying to get at here, guys, is when you look at this slackline from the side view, when you look at this slackline in the park, or you look at that 400-meter slackline up on the top of Minturn or whatever, and you know the weight of the slackliner in it, and you know the distance between these two anchors, because we know it's a 400-meter long slackline, and we can look at it from the side with that guy's drone and see how much the line sags down when our slackliner is in the middle of it. We know exactly how much force, if this was that slackline, there's not a picture of it yet. I could have taken one off the Vail Daily, I guess. We know exactly how much force we're pulling on our anchors. So that's That's as sciencey as I'm going to get. Sciencey, physicsy. I mean, basically, we got two triangles, a spatial triangle and a force triangle. And using those quantities that we know in there, we can solve for the tension in the line, which is the most important thing, because it's the tension in the line that's going to break things if anything is ever going to break. And because we know that, we never let anything break. Because if we were on this, if this guy was on this line and we had pulled it so tight that there was no sag, right? That H was very, very small. If H is very, very small here, right, this quantity becomes very, very big. And tension goes up through the roof. H gets small when the slack line gets tight. When the slack line is so tight that it can't sag down when the slackliner stands on it, that's when your forces get really big. So anybody ever in Boy Scouts? Did they, or Girl Scouts, or whatever? Did they ever do that thing where they teach you how to pull a car out of a ditch? If you've got a rope, sometimes it actually makes more sense, rather than to get all your friends pulling directly on the rope, to tie the rope from the, obviously you've got the rope attached to the car. I didn't say that, but instead of just pulling directly on the rope, you can attach the rope to another tree, to a tree next to it, and then have all your friends pull sideways on the rope. And that multiplies your force. It's the same exact thing. In climbing, they call it a triangle of death. You know what I'm talking about, Paul? Yeah. When you have two forces going, if you have two forces, I guess let's say three forces, right? And one like that. This is your main force, and you've got these two forces trying to compensate. When this angle gets very large, in other words, if you've got two people trying to pull this way and keep another person from pulling a rope that way, it becomes very hard because of the angles and this equation. So that's how you keep track of your tension in your slack line, by using simple things that we know. Weight of the slackliner, dimensions of it, that sort of thing. QED, that's what you say in physics when you make a proof or whatever. Anybody have any questions about that? Yep, yeah, Bob.
This is maybe the non-science implications of what you talked about, but does slacklining become more difficult, especially in a short distance with a line that doesn't have a lot of tension, the closer you get to the center?
Well, so the closer, that doesn't have so much to do with this. This is more about, okay, so for example, when you are in the center, the forces on, obviously this is an idealized situation because you're in the middle. If you're standing 3/4 of the way along the line, you've got to rearrange your equation, and you can still do it, but the math becomes much more difficult. You've got to bring in trigonometry and do angles. And that sort of thing. Here, the slackliner is in the middle, therefore the tension is equal here and here. And so when you're in the middle, you're in the point of utmost symmetry in your slackline. When you're towards the very end, it actually, and this is more not so sciencey and physicsy, this is more just in your brain. If you're standing here close to the edge of the slackline and you're looking at the edge, your brain doesn't have to compute so much, because it's looking at it seems like a shorter line, right? But then if you were standing at the edge facing the other way, facing the longer distance, your brain is looking at a longer slack line, and your brain tells you that I'm on a longer slack line. So when you're closer to an anchor looking at the end, it feels easier, even though you're still controlling the entire slack line with your body. It's a tough question. That was a good question. I don't have a great answer for it. Is it easier or harder in the middle? Some people like it in the middle better. And like when you go to slackline competitions, trickline competitions, you'll have some trickliners who only slackline in the middle, and you'll have some slackliners who only slackline 6 feet from the edge, and they have a point that they like. So it's a little bit of a preference thing too. That's not a sciencey thing. That's just a preference thing. There was another question, I thought? Yeah.
Do all slackliners have to have masters in physics?
No, that's the beauty of it.
And I have a follow-up, but when you describe this, as you're entering, and you're a professional, as you're stepping onto a slackline, and I'm thinking of GoPro games back here in May.
Yep.
How much of this arithmetics are you actually jumbling through your head when you're, because
on the line,
somebody else set the slack lines up at GoPro. So you're just showing up.
I guess I should have put that in my intro. I'm the organizer of everything that you saw at the GoPro Mountain Games, slackline wise. I put that whole thing together, everything. Oh, good, thanks. We're gonna bring back the trick line competition next year. I've heard it from 1,000 people. Bring back the trick line competition. I know.
But you set it up, but then all the athletes that are getting on here doing this.
They're not doing arithmetics, and so here's the beautiful thing with slacklining. A lot of this can be intuitive. You can, if you've slacklined 100, I've slacklined thousands of times. I can look at a tree and watch when somebody's bouncing on it, and look at the size of the base of its trunk. And if you watch really carefully, even on huge trees, you can see it move a millimeter when people bounce on it like that. And you start to develop this really intuitive, non-quantitative, totally qualitative understanding of exactly what I just talked about, the physics and the forces. So no, when they're standing on the line, they're not doing math. They're thinking about, they're doing more yogic things, Eastern things. They're doing their breath, their mind, their things like that. I think.
Speaks to the community aspect. Like, I don't know too many highliners that would get on the line without inspecting it first. And I think that may be more of your point.
Yeah, you wouldn't just show up to a highline and be like, hey guys, clip in, woohoo, jump out. You'd look at it, and you'd look at the anchors, or you'd look at the trees or the bolts, you'd look at the line, or you'd look at another slackliner on the line before you got on maybe, and you'd see how much sag there is when they're on it. And you tell yourself, oh wow, this line's really tight. How tight did you guys get this? Or, oh, this line's really loose. Did you guys add any tension to it? That's a conversation slackliners have every time when they set up a line. They talk about the tension. Let's add more tension. Let's take some tension out. You're constantly taking that rubber band and dialing it in with what you want.
On a per athlete basis.
Yeah. Some like it tight, some like it loose.
So when I go, and this is what most of us see in the valley here, when I go to GoPro and I see that, so an individual athlete that's going to take that line, do they have the option of saying, please dial us in this way?
Yes, to an extent. Obviously, it's an event, and we've got to put on a show for people, and we can't be up there changing the tension all the time. The community is not, I like all the analogies with webs, right? Webbing. The community is a web, and as the community grows and gets more into the sport and things progress, people develop certain tastes. And for that slackline, pretty much everybody there wanted it the exact same tension, the perfect tension for the perfect bounce, for all of that. Not too tight, not too loose, just perfect. And you can do that either by feel, intuition. We can look at a line and figure it out ourselves. We don't have to do the physics, although I did do this for our anchors to make sure we were good. But you could also throw a dynamometer on it, a force meter that has a load cell in it that tells you the exact number of pounds that you're subjecting those two towers to. We didn't do that. We didn't have a dynamometer. We knew exactly what we were doing, almost intuitively. Yeah?
Compensate for temperature and winds, because there were some winds that would come blowing through there by Solaris.
A constant wind can sometimes help a slackliner. It can actually, because when you're on the line, this is like, we're getting into advanced physics now. We're getting into wave modes, eigenfunctions, frequencies, Fourier transforms, and stuff like that. But the slackline's waving around. It's wavy. And you want to settle down those waves. A constant wind can actually settle down those waves a little bit. A sporadic gusting wind can be very tough, but a constant wind can be good. Temperature is pretty easy too. Higher temperature, more elasticity in your material. Kind of. But it's not that big of a deal. Slackliners aren't scared of wind. We thrive on, we're in a search, we're challenging ourselves. We're trying to walk a freaking 1-inch wide piece of webbing across, whatever canyons. We're looking for challenges. Sometimes wind can be a good thing. Physics. We did it. I almost messed up. Two equations, two unknowns, solve. That's what I've been trying to say this whole time. Slackline is essentially a rubber band, and we're pulling the rubber band tight between 2 points. We do this with our gear and our muscles. We've got pulleys or ratchets, and then we have mechanical advantage in those systems, and then we pull on it. We pull on it with our arms and our bodies. That's how we get the slack lines tight. So I've been talking about this a lot. We're getting close to the end because I've already talked about all this. A slack line has the essential slack line parts. 2 anchors, those could be 2 trees. They could be two huge boulders that you also wrap like the trees, or they could be boulders that you put bolts in, right? It could be a building. It could be a huge, pillar, which is actually what we're going to do out here afterwards if any of you guys want to try the world's most perfect beginner slackline with some instruction by me. Ground, you can actually make a slackline anchor in the ground. You can dig a hole. You can fill the hole with concrete, dip some chain into the concrete, put some rebar through the chain first, and then you've got a super strong ground anchor. Does that make sense? You dig a hole like this big, put your chain in, put rebar through it, fill the hole with concrete, ground anchor. And then you take the line up over an A-frame, and then that's how you get your height, because you can't slackline on the ground. The slackline has to be high. Protection, padding for the trees and gear. We've kind of gone over that, right? If I were to take this up to a tree and that'd be bad. If it had 1,000 pounds of force on it, and then I went like that, it would, you've all seen it. When things are tight, you can cut them much more easily with a knife. That comes back to the ski lift rescue story, too. That strap cut like butter because it was tight. It's at the end. It's the finale, the story. So that's part of the essential parts, right? This part right here, the tree, the anchor, the padding. Then obviously the slack line, right? It could be, or two slack lines in the case of highlining, because we want backups, right? We don't put our entire life into one. Even though this ain't gonna break, I'd feel better if there were two of them. That's why highlining has two, why we use two, with the rule of redundancy. Webbing, or flat rope, we've been over that, can be 1 inch wide or 2 inch wide. It can be made of nylon, which is like what our trampolines are made out of, very stretchy, or it can be made out of polyester. Believe it or not, polyester, like what our clothes are made out of, when you treat the strands and fibers right, it's actually stronger than nylon and less stretchy. So when you want a slackline to have low stretch, like this is polyester webbing. Like for my presentation out there, I'm going to set up a slackline very low for you guys. I don't want it to stretch. I want it to just be there and not stretch down to the ground. That's when you would do polyester. Or there's even higher tech webbings that, like when astronauts go for spacewalks on the outside of the International Space Station, they've got a cord tethered to them. That's made of a material called Vectran. And we have slackline webbings that are also made out of Vectran. So there's a lot, you can make slacklines out of, you can make a hemp slackline if you wanted to. You could light it on fire even. And then essential slackline parts. Tension. Obviously you need some kind of tension, right? You can't just connect them together and go on hopes and wishes that you don't touch the ground, right? You got to pull the rubber band tight so that it doesn't touch the ground. And so that it's hard for me to explain to non-slack, or just hard for me to explain why tension is important. You can have lots of tension or less tension. Some highliners prefer more tension than less tension, and vice versa. You don't always need tension. Some slackliners literally do tension their slacklines with no pulleys. They pull them tight with their hands and tie knots. You can do that, but most people use either pulleys or ratchets. Pulleys, ratchets, or hardware. You can also make I guess I forgot to, let's talk about hardware really fast. This is how we anchor our slackline. You can pass that around really fast. Essentially what we do is, this is called a web lock. This is one of the best ways to anchor your slackline. You take a bite of your webbing, doubled up, right? You put it through the web lock, and then you bring that bite up through here, push that pin. See how there's this pin right here? Push that pin right there, and then boom. That's not going anywhere, but then watch what happens when I pull the bottom. But I pull the top, nothing. That's how, and it's all because of angles, right? This pin's a little bit higher than this pin. So when I pull on this top webbing, it smashes down on this bottom webbing, right? You see that? Top webbing, bottom webbing. I could pass it around as is, but I don't think I need to. You guys all kind of get it, right? That's how we anchor our slack lines to our web locks. That's how we did it at the GoPro Mountain Games. We attached this via a shackle to one of these that was wrapped around one of those towers. What were they called? I don't remember now. Deer in the headlights. I can't remember the name of the towers. They have a name. They're like scaffolding towers or whatever. So yeah, it's kind of the same. That's called a web lock. It's part of our hardware system. What did I do with the? Okay. So just a little bit of a closer look at gear. Like most of the sports we love, slacklining is a gear-intensive sport that can be intimidating. I feel like a lot of people don't get into the sport of slacklining simply because they don't know how. That was my big thing. I just saw a guy doing a backflip on a slackline 10 years ago, and I immediately got his email and asked him to send me a list of what I needed to go buy. And you can find this online a lot easier now these days. But here we have a bunch of different types of web locks, like from Germany, from America, from China. I mean, there are all these different kinds. You see these? These are exactly like what I'm passing around right now. Those are web locks. These are all the different kinds of webbings, right? I mean, different materials, different stretches, different strengths, different widths, all kinds of things. You got a million different kinds of carabiners, a million different kinds of shackles, and yeah, and it can be a little confusing, right? So, after this, if any of you are curious about like, oh, I want to get a slackline for my kids, or I want to get a slackline for myself, or something like that, I can give you my email, and I'm happy to give you guys a personalized, breakdown of what I think would work for you guys to get into slacklining, because it can be daunting. It can be daunting. Like we were talking about with our anchor gear, you can have anchor gear like span sets. If you're rigging less serious slacklines like the one we're going to rig out here, or just like your first ever slackline, it doesn't have to be span sets. It can be just a piece of rope. Not maybe a piece of rope from Walmart, but maybe a piece of rope from a climbing store. You're going to have your tree wear that goes around the tree. You're going to wrap your sling around the tree, and then you're going to have some kind of hardware connection that connects your slackline. Or in the case of Gibbon slacklines, which are the most popular slackline in the world, you buy a kit. You literally, on one side, you literally just wrap the line around the tree itself, and on the other side, you have a ratchet. So that's a pretty easy way. The other way that I highly recommend that people get into slacklining is with the primitive setup. That's literally just webbing and carabiners from a climbing store, and that's all you need. You can get a slackline kit from a climbing store for $50. Webbing, anchors, and carabiners, and rappel rings. But if any of you have any questions, if any of you have any more in-detail questions about that, I'm happy to explain that. But we're all kind of on the same page here. Those are our anchor materials. Slackline webbing, really fast. You can have 1 inch wide. Do I have any pictures of 2 inch wide webbing in here? Unfortunately, I don't think I do, but oh no, a bird. I think he's okay. Oh, that's one of the things I'm working on at NREL, solar panels to go into windows. And one good side effect of that is, so these are transparent solar cells, but they're not perfectly transparent, right? They have a slight color to them. But my theory is that when we put these on all the skyscrapers in New York City and everywhere, a lot of birds' lives are going to be saved because they're not going to fly into the windows. That's really funny that happened, because that's exactly what I'm working on at NREL right now.
About when you're slacklining, any bird issues?
Yeah, I've had some birds fly really close to me on the high line, and it's cool. I've had hummingbirds go, and yeah, you're up there in some high lines, you're up in the sky. But really fast, 1 inch or 2 inch. Generally 1 inch is for walking and like highlining, 2 inches for trick lining. The length can be not really 0. That's actually wrong. You can't have a 0-foot slackline. But you can have a 5-foot long slackline if you want. Generally 20, I like to say 15 foot is the good beginner length, or 10 feet, up to infinity. They just set the world record in Canada. Does anybody want to take a guess how long the longest high line is right now? The longest slackline ever completely walked by a person? 2 kilometers. More than 4 times as long as this big line they just set up in Minturn. That's the new world record. 2 kilometers long. A guy and a girl, Lucas Ermler and Mia Noblet, from Germany and Canada respectively, walked it from start to finish, no falls.
How long does that take?
Lucas Ermler walked it in 58 minutes. Mia walked it in 1 hour and 56 minutes.
That's awesome.
Yep, so it's cool. The 2 best slackliners in the world are a guy and a girl. Yeah, it's amazing. They're cool. Stretch, you can have low to high stretch. it goes more than that. We generally classify slacklines with percentages. Oh, this webbing will stretch 10% of its length at 1,000 pounds of force. That's kind of how we characterize the stretch of a webbing. And you can have webbing like the Vectran webbing, what the astronauts use, and we have Vectran webbing that stretches 2% at 5,000 pounds of force. Like it stretches almost not at all. Strength. You could have slackline webbing made of paper if you wanted, and it would break at no force. You can have slackline webbing made of that's super thick and won't break after 10,000 pounds, for example. And it's all based on the amount of material, the type of material, and the weave of it. There are certain ways you weave the webbing is stronger than others. This webbing, I think, has a breaking strength of probably like 4,000 pounds. Maybe 3. It's hard to say. It's older, so and the breaking strength goes down as you use it more. So the more you use a slackline, you keep track of it in your log, or you just intuitively keep track. Oh, I've had this slackline for 3 years and I've been using it a bunch. It's maybe time to retire it, just like a climbing rope. Or it's got frays in it. A fray in your webbing will reduce its strength. So, the system's not perfect. Obviously, if you set up a slackline with tons of rips and tears in it, it might break on you, but that's what we try to avoid. The tensioning system. This is a little more convoluted. You can get a lot of things. You can use ratchets, you can use pulleys, you can use hardware. We've kind of talked about that. We'll go into it really quick when we go out there and set up the slackline really fast. But there's a lot of different ways to tension your slackline. Or you can have no tension in your slackline, like I was saying. People just tie knots. Like this slackline obviously has, I like to sometimes call it negative tension or positive slack. Clearly you could pull this line tighter by hand, right, when she's not on it. It's not a tight slack line. It has so much slack in it that the anchors are 10 feet high and the line goes down. That's what we call rodeo lining. And that is also possible to slackline on. When the person's not standing on it, there's almost 0 pounds of force on it because it's completely loose. But when they stand on it, you can still use these equations exactly like what we talked about to determine the forces. It's pretty, basically that slackline leg is holding up half of her weight and that slackline leg is holding up half of her weight. A little bit more than that because of the angles, but it's essentially that. Okay, so that's kind of it for the technical stuff. We'll just watch a couple of videos real fast and wrap it up. This is like a real-world application. This is the actual literal proposal I sent over to Solaris for this year's. This is what I wanted to do at Solaris this year. Do you guys recognize it? You guys see the ice rink? I wanted to go from these chimneys and these chimneys. They said no. So instead, we put up those towers and rigged like that, and it worked out great. It was fine. But this is the real-world application of it. I did the physics of it. I wrote all the equations. I said, we're going to put this much force on these chimneys and these chimneys. And I have another pair of images just like this where I did the sag, right, rather than straight lines. And that was how I estimated to the city engineer how much force I'd be putting on their chimneys.
I know this is an odd question, but a little bit about the athleticism of trick liners. I think it's just absolutely, it's marvelous to watch, watching them.
But they're not athletes. They're just, trick liners are the real athletes. Highliners are just hippies up there. No, I'm kidding.
But so a trick liner is doing all these flips and they're landing on a piece that is smaller than a balance beam.
Yep.
Is there any correlation for them going in and doing it on the balance beam, or is it the tension and pop that allows them to do what they do? Do you have any guys that can do both? Or is that there's a crossover of that, or is it?
I mean, there is, yeah, because there are guys that stand on slack lines and do backflips and land back on the slack line, and that seems a little bit harder than on a balance beam, right? Which doesn't move at all. But
they've got the bounce.
They've got the bounce, which helps them. And balance beamers don't have the bounce.
Right.
There's a correlation, but there's been no studies, so I'll leave that up to you to write the paper and submit it to Nature.
But there's no gymnasts that came to slacklining that you know.
Yes, there are some, and they do really well. There's these two brothers from Peru, for example, Choza and I forget the other guy's name, Robles, and they are gymnasts from Peru, and they're amazing. They can do triple flips and stuff. Yeah. Trick lining, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, people were doing single flips. About 3 or 4 years ago, the first double flip was landed, and about 2 years ago, 1.5 years ago, the first triple flip was landed. And now there's 10 guys in the world that can do triples. So that's a little, some data points for you to think about. Sports progressing. So now More real-world applications. This is the other promo. I sent that to the mountain games, and I sent them this to try to get them stoked. These are all some of my past projects that I've done. So this is a slackline project in Dubai. So you see the towers, and that's a trick line. See how tight it is? 2 inches wide. That's a 1 inch wide slack line, 200 feet long over a river in Dubai. See the bounce? That's a 2 inch wide slack line at a mall in Abu Dhabi. See how we wrapped the pillars and used the tree wear? That is, well, you know where that is, Mandalay Bay, Las Vegas. Boom. We rigged 4 slack lines on the top of Mandalay Bay Hotel in Las Vegas. Look at that. You think the sport's safe? Very safe. Everybody's just hanging out on their leashes. See the leash rings and the leash? This is a music festival in New York City. There we wrap the building anchors. That's the trick line competition I was telling you about. Trick line over an airbag. See the rebound potential, right? That's the force I'm talking about to spring you back up when the line is tight enough. And that's the same idea but at a competition in San Francisco. Trick lines rigged between steel, basically. That's a Red Bull competition in Gdynia, Poland, rigged between 2 masts of a ship. And that's in Moab, Utah. That's Golden, Colorado. So you can do all, trick lining is slack lining in general is a very freestyle, it's like skateboarding. You can do whatever you want with it. However, you can do flips, you can do spins, you can just walk it. Doesn't matter, it's just an expression. Yeah, it worked, right?
Was that spot in Moab out at Gemini Bridges, Mickey?
Close to it. It's out near Gemini Bridges. I can give you more. I can tell you where it is. Whoops, what did I do? You can also use slack lines just for access. Like if you're a base jumper and you don't want to jump off the dangerous cliff and you want to jump off in the middle of the cliff, away from all the scary rock.
Dedicate yourself to spending hours working on hard tricks, challenging yourself, overcoming adversity.
So that's a high line. You see the backup loops? Or the spur, what'd you call them? I forget. Yeah. So yeah, you see that? Using a slack line as an access point. And landing by the Ford truck. Yeah. This was the world's first double flip on a high line. Still totally safe, still with a leash. See how it works? And this is those were kind of all highlining, right? Everything in there had a leash. This is just plain trick lining. This is a video we worked on with Devin Supertramp, who's a really famous YouTuber guy. He makes a lot of videos, and he basically travels the world making YouTube videos. That's Andy Lewis, the same guy from that first picture. Midway, Utah. There's these ice castles. If you're ever in Utah, go to Midway, Utah, and check out the ice castles. We literally we were slinging ice like ice pillars, and we were even hammering ice screws into the ice. And then we decided to set some stuff on fire because it was all melting anyways. So that's trick lining over the ground. So there's a high line actually, or a small high line, but in the background if you see it. a really good kind of comparison of the two types of the sport. So see, this is just like freestyle skiing, right? That was like a Bio 7 or whatever. You can do yoga on a slackline, right? You don't have to bounce, you can just do warrior poses and things like that. Or you can combine it with other things like poi or hula hoop or whatever. There's a kind of a yoga pose. Strong toes that guy has. Oh, the crash scene. Back when I was young and didn't slackline over pads. That's my wife, Purple, on the high line in the background. I felt that one in the morning. Trick lining. That was basically a general gist of trick lining, okay? High tension, rebound potential. And then this thing, this has nothing to do with science. This just has to do with training a lot. I had been slacklining for many, many years, and I found myself in this situation where our friend got his backpack strap caught on the chair. Basically, he had his hip strap unbuckled, and his chest strap was buckled. And I don't know if you guys have skied A Basin, but the Lenawee chairlift, one of the fastest fixed grip chairs in the country. It goes around the bull wheel really fast. He tried to ski off and get away, like you do at the top of the chairlift, and his hip strap got caught in the chair, got stuck. He tried to ski away. The chairlift had a different idea, went around the bull wheel. His backpack went and pulled him, so now he's getting pulled around the bull wheel at the top of the chairlift. He goes around the auto stop gate because he was on the outside of the chairlift, and then the chair just kept going, and he ended up there, 2 towers down. I think one of us those are my friends there. We tried to make a human pyramid to get to him, but it didn't work because, as you can see, the powder is about a foot deep, and we tumbled over. Science is great, slacklining is great. I learned a lot at School of Mines about problem solving and figuring out problems, and this was a big problem that needed to get solved really fast. And I had my eureka moment. We didn't know how to get to him. I mean, how do you get to him? Ski Patrol wasn't there yet. We had like a few minutes to figure this out. They were on their way, Ski Patrol, but they weren't there yet. So I had my eureka moment. I didn't see a chairlift and cable, and there's the towers over here. I saw a tree and a slack line. I saw a slack line there. I was like, I can get across that thing. So I left my friends. I ran up the hill to the tower right there. I started climbing it. Somebody arrived, I think Ski Patrol arrived right there and yelled at me not to climb it, and I think I didn't listen to him. I think I was in like total flow state mode. I wasn't paying attention. I was just going fast, like as fast as I could. And I got up onto the tower. I didn't walk across the cable because I had ski boots on, and that'd be kind of ridiculous. I was trying to get across it as fast as I could. I wasn't about to risk falling, and I got on it basically like a horse. I basically slid across it like I was like on a horse, kind of like that, just sliding down it. And I grabbed on to right there, the clamp part. I swung my feet down onto the top of the chair. And then the really funny part is when I then put my hands right about there and swung my feet down to the chair, my jacket caught on my jacket caught bad. And for a second, we almost had two hanging guys. For a split second, but I got it off, and then I got there. And as you can see, Ski Patrol had just arrived, right? They're like just on the scene. I get down there and I evaluate the scene. I realize what's happening. I'm like, oh man, his backpack strap is caught. Oh, his chest strap is around his neck. I gotta do something. So I first I think about physics. I'm like, okay, this strap is really tight and it's a backpack strap. Maybe if I kick it really hard, because I didn't have my knife, and you gotta have a knife. I usually have a knife. My knife was in my lunchbox. I woke up at 4 a.m. to get to A Basin that day. It's not my fault. I kick the backpack strap as hard as I can, trying to do like what I'm talking about, the death triangle. I'm trying to kick the strap to shock load it, to break it, and it's not happening. And at that moment, one of the ski patrol guys down there just yells at me. All I hear is, "Knife!" And I look down, and sure enough, there's a ski patroller holding the knife. And I like make eyes with him, and I'm like, "Okay, yeah." And I nod, and he goes like that, and it just perfect toss. It tractor beams to my hand. Boom. I catch it. I open it up, and I cut him down. It was all thanks to slacklining and science, problem solving. There I am, right? I'm not kicking him in the head. I'm trying to break the backpack strap. There's the throw. Did you guys see the throw? It was a little fast. It all happened very, very fast. One more time. Kicking, kicking, kicking. That was a nice throw. Not that was a nice catch, maybe. Just kidding.
Ski patrol yell at you afterwards, or they thank you?
Well, Alan Hensroth. No, actually, it was Patrick, director Patrick O'Sullivan. You know, Mickey, you pretty much broke every rule in the book, but we're glad you did.
Can you still ski there?
Yeah, I need to reach out to Alan to see if he can help me out with a pass this year. I'm not getting an icon.
And you knew that kid?
I met him that morning.
Oh, yeah.
He was a friend of a friend. Now I know him really well. Now we're good friends. He's a ripper. He's not a bad skier. He's not a Jerry. They were trying to go ski backcountry that day, and part of that is why he was wearing a backpack. Also, he has Marker Dukes and regular alpine boots. Very heavy ski setup. Oh, on 194 centimeter atomic bent Chetlers. Heavy setup. His setup weighed a lot. So you can imagine he's getting pulled. He's got these heavy skis on. He didn't stand a chance. He was hanging by his neck for 4 to 5 minutes, ski patrol estimated. He was unconscious from the moment we saw. I gave you guys pretty much the short story. I could go into the story way more in depth. When we got off the chair, we didn't see him. We didn't know where he was. It was a whiteout powder day. We didn't even know it happened until he'd already been hanging for a minute. We were like looking for our buddy, and then we heard people behind us down by the ski lift yelling, and then we decided to go down the hill. And by the time we even saw him, he was already hanging limp. Doctors estimated he was very close to brain damage and all that.
He recovered fully.
We were skiing powder at Telluride 2 weeks later.
Wow.
He and I went on a victory, you're still alive trip.
Well, you guys FaceTimed that night.
We FaceTimed that night. The doctors, yeah, from your house in Frisco, Bob.
Alan?
And then
Well, sometimes
I got to.
puts a person in your life.
I always say it like this.
The most. Our next guest walked 30
Ellen got to meet me. No, I'm just kidding. I got to meet Ellen.
Who was hanging from his backpack. From Colorado, Golden, Colorado, please welcome Mickey Wilson and the man he saved, Richard. What is
Not his real name.
crazy story? So you happened to
We don't need to watch it. You can Google it.
When did you exactly?
She's a scaredy cat. She wouldn't let me teach her to slackline. I tried so hard. No, she's really sweet. We had a great, 5-10 minute conversation while I was on set with. You don't get to meet Ellen too much. She's rock star status. You don't get to hang out with her or whatever. You get to hang out with her on stage and chat a little bit during the show. It was good.
I have one last question on the lefty back piece. When did his skis come off, and where were they? How did he? I've never understood how he got around the bull wheel and got there, but had no skis on.
They came off as he was getting drug around the bull wheel.
Okay.
They had to have, because they're not there. Somebody went and picked him up after it was all over. They came off as he got drug around the bull wheel. It's Lenawee. This winter, go up to A Basin and think about it when you're there. When that lifty gives you the bump, it hurts. Like, that lift just goes so fast, which is good, but yeah, good question. His skis just popped off. They weren't on him when he doesn't remember anything. So I think that slacklining, I couldn't have done that without slacklining. And I think that also problem-solving skills, which I learned a lot at Colorado School of Mines and by studying science, I think helped me a lot put those two equations together. And that's why I love slacklining and science. Thanks a bunch, guys. Sorry I went so long. I don't know if we have time for the slackline. It's okay, but I'm still totally willing to set it up really fast. It'll take 2 minutes if you guys want to just see a slackline get set up really fast. Or if there's any more questions or anything like that. No? Sweet. Let's go outside really fast, and I'll just give you the final slackline setup demonstration. We all saw it on the screen. We can just see it really fast, and then I think we're done. So when you're setting up a slackline, yeah, we're going to go a little low. You want to think about like all those things that we talked about. And am I doing arithmetic right now in my head? No. But I set this line up like 2 hours ago to make sure. But even then I wasn't doing arithmetic. It's all intuitive, right? I've set this up. I know that this is a low stretch webbing. I know a lot of things about it. And I know that this is low stretch webbing. I know that we've got a low line, meaning it's going to go a little lower. Yeah, something like that. That looks pretty safe, right? So now, hold that. It's not going to work, right? It's like what I was talking about, tension, right? So we add a little more tension. We do this. This is slacklining like, this isn't 101. This is like 301 or 401. So don't worry about what I'm doing right now with this. But this is essentially a gripper for slackline webbing. And this is essentially some mechanical advantage. So now when I do this, you looking good? When I pull on this, it gets a lot tighter. Okay, Paul, you want to come help me on the last little bit? And this is the great thing about slacklining. It's a social thing. Your friends help you set it up, and then you slackline with your friends. You help your friends learn. 1, 2, 3, pull. 1, 2, 3, pull. Okay, what do you guys think? You guys think it's tighter? Yeah, so we added tension and the line sags less. That's the long and short of it, you know what I mean, guys? So, now I set this here. I check to make sure that we're on the padding. That all looks good. And this looks good. So now, who wants to be my first pupil? Don't all jump up at once. I'm looking over here. Come on, who wants to hold? Is that wine?
Yeah.
Okay, have her hold you. You can say, hold my wine. So.
I've literally never tried it.
Okay, so guys, no, wait, no, it's not. Let me give you some instruction.
I'm so excited.
So you stand. So first off, you stand here, and you don't want to like stand out here, right, or way over here. If I'm here, my center of mass is right above the line, right? So now. My right leg is stronger than my left leg. So when I teach people, I like to tell them put your strong leg on it. You can go like that if you want, but I recommend straight. And what did I talk about? From here down, strong and athletic bend in the knees, right? From here up, loose, doing the balance thing. So I'm going to step on it like I'm stepping up on a stair. I tell people, if you can walk upstairs and if you can balance on one foot on the ground, you have the physical ability to slackline. Pay attention. Look closely. You're going to do this next. So I'm going to press onto the slackline. See how it gets tight when I press on it? I'm going to start to, I can stay here and just give myself a good quad burn, or I can try to go for it and go up, and now I'm in slackline mode. Now, what am I doing? Keeping the center of my mass right over this line. And I'm not looking straight down because that creates bad body posture. All right? I'm not showing off. I'm showing you how to. I'm showing you the step one of 10,000 steps. So, when you ride your bike, do you look down at the front wheel? No, you look at where you're going, right? You kind of look there. When you're slacklining, you don't look down there. You look at generally I like to look at the anchor because the anchor's a fixed point in space. It's my reference point. It doesn't move. The slackline might move back and forth, but the anchor doesn't. So I look there. I keep my legs strong. I can go to 2-leg posture like this or 1 leg, right? And when I'm in 1 leg, I've got this balancing act. See how I'm moving my center of mass and keeping it always, wait, see if I can do this one. See that? But I'm keeping my center of mass over the line. If I'm over here, it's the same thing, okay? My arms are loose, my legs are athletic and strong, and if I want to walk, I'm going like this. Watch what happens when I go too much like that. I fall off. Center of mass. That's it. Okay, come over here. No, and for learning, you don't have to do that by yourself. I'm gonna hold my arm here, and
you prefer the straight on? Because you were talking about how some people like. I feel like.
Yeah, go straight. Go straight. Now grab my wrist.
I'm left-handed.
Okay. So just grab my wrist, and that way you're holding on to me. I'm not holding on to you. So now where are you looking?
At straight the ankle.
Uh-huh. Yep. And your legs have a nice athletic bend in them. You're barely using my arm. You're barely using it. Yes. One more time. Yeah. That was good. Here, you can take my wrist again. And this is how I picked up girls in college and how I met my wife. It works. It's so good for meeting people, having fun with friends.
I still feel like the white.
Nice. Good. So that's how you do it. You can learn to. It takes time. You've got these little stabilizer muscles in your calf and your ankle that even if you're a world-class skier, Bodie Miller, or who's the really good skier from around here? The girl. Michaela Schifrin.
Chris Anthony.
Oh, Chris Anthony's awesome. I like Chris. He's a good guy. When you're starting out, it's a new sport. You just haven't attuned to it. So people get discouraged. I'll be honest. That story I told you about learning to slackline at college, I hated slacklining freshman year of college. I tried it a couple times. I wasn't good at it. I was used to being good at things when I first tried them, like most of my athletic activities. I feel like I was good at. Slacklining's not like that. I don't care how much of an athlete you are. It takes a little bit of time before whatever athletic background you have really kicks in and helps you along the way. There's a hill that you gotta get over, and that's one of the tough things about slacklining. I think why it hasn't maybe blossomed into a worldwide sensation sport like skateboarding or something, because it's harder at the very start. But if you set up a line like this and spend a couple dedicated hours on it, a week even, just like an hour a day for 3 days a week or something, you'll get it. Your stabilizer muscles will start to figure it out, and then you'll make those little micro movements and it all comes together. If you can walk upstairs and if you can stand on one foot, it's the same physical requirements. It just takes a little bit of tuning and dialing in of your muscles and your balance. And people that tell me I don't have good balance, I can't slackline, that's silly. Nobody has intrinsic good balance. Balance is not a God-given quality. It's learned through practice and diligence. Perseverance, that's the word I was looking for. I'm such a bad presenter. I don't make my words good. So, slacklining. That's all it is. And if any of you guys want, I'm happy to give you guys my email so that you can ask me about, I want to get a slackline. I want to get my kids a slackline. I want to get my friend a slackline. It's not, you can buy a slackline kit for $50. It's not expensive and it'll last you years. So, thanks guys. Cool. Yeah, come on. Yeah. Okay. Do you want a hand or no?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Yep. So, just like what I talked about. Yep. Good. Don't look there. Look there. Take my wrist. Yeah. See how the wobbles went away once you committed to it? They were wobbling and they went away. Now, arms up a little bit. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so now just kind of relax. Balance on one foot maybe. Try to experiment with that that other leg as a balancing tool. And that's what I'm saying. Give it a couple hours of actual practice. Literally in your first session, if you really focus on what you're doing over the first 2 hours, you'll see a huge change. in what you can do. Don't go into it timidly. Trust yourself. Step up on it. The more you bend your knee, the more you think that you're carving into a hard ski turn or something, it'll go away. See how it goes away? Yes, yes. Very good. And remember, there's also just the element of stabilizer muscles, little tiny muscles and ligaments and tendons in your legs that just aren't ready for it. So don't be discouraged. Don't be discouraged. It's not. Really?
Yeah.
Thank God we're under the roof. We were worried about rain earlier. Paul, you want to give it a shot? All right. Now don't look down. Arms up. Now your arms are down. Start out with your arms in the slackline. This is the most important thing in slacklining. Those arms. They gotta move your center of. Yes. Nice. A little more bend in your knee. A little more athlete. Yeah. See that you were doing it. You were moving your center of mass.
I don't know if flip-flops is the way.
Flip-flops are not the way to go. Barefoot or like a really good tight shoe with a flat sole. I can see why you like those flip-flops. You've got a crazy flip-flop tan.
Yeah, I do like flip-flops.
That's good. It's a good summer tan. You want to try it? Come on.
I've seen it too before, Mickey, where people will like run like a guideline.
Uh-huh.
Where you can kind of put your hand on something.
Yep. Yeah. Arms up like this. Nice. Good. I like see it. And obviously when you're lower, knees are bent, your center of mass is lower, that's always better, right? Better than high center of mass. If your center of mass was 1,000 feet high, it'd be really hard. Arms up. Don't look down, look at the anchor. Good. No, but not straight. Sorry, giving you too many instructions. Nothing in slacklining should be straight. It should all be slack. It should all be bend in the knees, not straight. Bend in the elbows. Bend at the waist.
One more shot.
Yep. Yes. So you can imagine if you were to set one of these up in the park with your friends, you could spend a lot of time. You could spend an afternoon having a nice day in the park. Do you want my wrist?
Yeah,
for
probably just in case.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea.
Right, you said look ahead.
Uh-huh.
Strong leg.
Strong leg. Oh, that looks pretty solid. That looks good. I've got no critique yet.
All right, bend at the legs.
A little bit more bend is never bad.
Yeah, I remember you said lower the center of gravity.
Yeah, now just think about keeping that center of gravity with your arms and your waist.
Nice, French.
Looks good. Looks good.
I just get a picture, Lance. So. Thank you.
Good job.
All right, Mackenzie.
Yeah, that's right. I do want an arm.
Sure.
Thank you.
And I like presenting a wrist. So that way they're holding onto you and you're not holding onto them. That way they can choose whether to let go or not or something. Where's your head?
Oh, yeah.
Yep. Good. A little more bend. A little more bend. Nice. That's perfect. Now you're perfect. Good job.
Thank you. Tell my family.
Yep.
Oh.
So yeah, it's fun. It's fun. You buy a slackline. You go to a park. You play some music. You hang out. Like I said, 93.4% of slacklines in the world rigged like this. Wrist or no wrist?
I'll do a wrist to start.
Okay. Eyes up. You can look down if you really want to, but I really like that bicycle analogy. Nice. Good. The boozy seltzer water makes it feel like you're actually drinking seltzer water. Feels like it's a health drink. Yeah, come on.
She's the climber.
Yeah, but you're a kayaker. Kayaking was my first love before I was kayaking.
I didn't say that. I'm gonna take the wrist.
Go for it. Now look ahead. You don't look at the hole that you're trying to paddle through. You look at the hole you're about to paddle through. That's maybe another analogy. Nice. A little more bend. A little more bend. Yeah, good. Nice. That looks good. I took my wrist away.
I know you did.
Try it again by yourself.
Okay.
Just try it. Just go one leg. Just yeah. Think positive thoughts. Nothing can go wrong.
You're wearing a very athletic hat.
That's yes. Yes. Yes, yes, more. So you did that thing where you kind of got straight leg. Think about having a little more bend in your right knee. More bend, the better. The more your quads are engaged, you know, that thing.
It's like some Yoda Jedi mind shit.
Yep, for sure. You're still a little straight in the leg, but it's good. All right. Well. So yeah, if you guys want, you can reach out to Walking Mountains to get my info. If you want to go get a slackline for yourself or your loved ones, I think it's a really great idea. I think slacklining has a lot of positive benefits to it, and everybody can do it, I promise.
Thank you.
All right. We did it, guys. Should I take the slack? I'll leave it up while I take the other stuff down.